Hello and welcome back to Stage Management 1. We're now in Module 2, Learning the Ropes. This module is split in two, where we have both technical information and then also managerial theory and practice. On the managerial theory and practice side, we discuss some of the materials in the readings and examples that are given there, which include the beginnings of prompt book and rehearsal book analysis, but also rehearsal book procedures and placements, and going through and looking at different ways to set up a rehearsal book or a prompt book in this case. One of the important things to know when setting up your prompt book is it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It's solely the stage manager, you. It's your book. You can set it up any way you wish as long as it's usable for you. It's very important to remember that fact because many people will have strong opinions on how prompt books should be set up, including myself. But no one can ever tell you that your book is set up incorrectly unless it's unusable to you, right? If it's not usable to you as a stage manager, it's not usable. And the reverse is also true. If it is usable to you in a clear, concise way with no lag or delay, it is perfectly acceptable to be used as a prompt book. One of the other things I'd like to talk about this week is how do we set up prompt books for quick access? There are many materials in here you may need at a moment's notice. For instance, if a performer has an allergic reaction in a rehearsal, that needs to be obtained within a moment's notice. You have to be able to quickly go to your book, flip the page, know exactly where performer contact information is in emergency forms, be able to flip right to that person's name, pull it out, and have that information. Please know that we're not in the emergency unit yet, but as we start talking about prompt books, we're going to start talking about emergency information because the two go hand in hand somewhat. So one of the things to think about when putting in performer materials is how are you going to obtain that information, right? Are you going to obtain performer information on a Google form, right, which is one of the more modern ways to think about this? Or are you going to obtain the information in a more traditional manner? You're going to hand out paper forms and either keep them in paper form or digitize them, either yourself or with the assistant stage manager. And again, as much with the prompt book, it's a personal answer. My personal preference is to have everything digitized. I would typically use a Google form, which would then feed into either a Google Sheet or a Google Sheet that then feeds into a database program. Microsoft Access is wonderful for this. I'm happy to show people how to set up an Access database. The only caveat being Access is a little more difficult or impossible to set up on a Mac, so sometimes you'll have to do a Windows PC partition, which luckily at the university, IC, institutional computing, for those of you who are new, is able to do this for free, and it's very simple. You should have to schedule a time with them to have that set up. Microsoft Access, as well as several other programs, including, there's many options. There's a wonderful Mac-based program, which I'll put a little blurb in about right here. FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Pro Advanced 17 are some of the most versatile Mac-based database programs in existence. With that being said, FileMaker Pro is quite an expensive program, retailing for over $300. This program can certainly be worth it if you learn how to use the program effectively. This is, of course, a more advanced level topic, but is certainly something that you could put to good use in your stage management practice. As you can see, this program is very robust. The problem with it is it's very robust. What do I mean by that? What I mean is this program takes a lot of learning to get used to it But once you've gone through that step and you've reached that learning curve, it really can do wonderful things for your automation and for your speed. And one of the things that's very important for a stage manager is efficiency. Does everybody know what we mean by efficiency? That doesn't mean making sure everything happens in a huge, quick succession. It means literally using your time in the most effective manner possible. Not necessarily everything has to be done incredibly quickly. Those two things can go hand in hand, but the most effective stage managers are efficient with time, but not rapid fire, boom, 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 boom. It appears effortless. And that is ultimately the goal, is to make your stage management appear effortless. One other thing to note here is when setting up your book, think very carefully about how you want to set up your book. Now, I know that sounds like kind of a double entendre there. Think carefully about setting up your book because you think carefully about setting up your book. What I mean by that is your book, the actual production Bible, can be set up in a number of ways. For instance, having clear, don't have to be in color, but clear information. This happens to be a lighting Bible. It's actually a spare, so there's actually nothing in it. But you can see that it's labeled on all sides. It's clear. You can tell upside down from right side up, because you can only imagine how quickly you need to get to information. It has pertinent people and everything on the bottom, the date. This becomes helpful later in your career because you're able to quickly reference old text, especially when you're remounting a show. I know it seems strange now to put the month and the year, but it does become very important later on. I did want to pull out another couple of pieces of information. The graphic design on a piece is usually quite important. The other thing that's important is to have good sheet protectors in your book. And I can show some of these in class, but having nice thick sheet protectors to be able to pull out and pass around or pass to someone is very important. These are thick. These are a little bit glossier than I prefer, but they're able to hold and secure lovely color prints like this one from Damage. This happens to be a rendering, but a design rendering is something that often would end up in the production book, not necessarily in the calling book. One of the things that I wanted to make sure was very clear is a production book and a calling book or a prompt script may not be the same thing, although they might. A production book is typically for the production cycle. Production cycle means from the moment that you are assigned to or hired for a show and the moment that that show opens. A prompt book, however, is used throughout the latter part of the production process, usually once cue meetings are had. So this means that typically it would begun to be used after the last meeting with the lighting designer prior to going into tech. This meeting may be pushed up earlier and you may be able to put cues in your production book, but I would advise waiting to put cues in your actual calling book. Now, at the university level where you're at now, those two items may be one and the same because we don't have extended runs. You may only be using a book for a couple of days. So again, it's a personal choice and it's something to think about. Another article that I wanted to bring to your attention was how to set up a book and what size books to use. We'll pause here for one moment. I'm going to show you a few here. These are all archive books, so they may not be as pretty as other things that I've shown you. These happen to be just in black binders with names on the spines. This happens to be from Hands on a Hardbody. This was a calling book, and because there were multiple pages without cues, cues in this book were marked with green tabs. Now, for those of you that may be a little bit more sensory focused, this may be a little overwhelming looking, Again, it was the personal preference, but allows you to turn to a page that has cues, right? So we're able to easily flip to the appropriate page. Another example, this is Tomas and the Library Lady. This was a regional theater production. This is interesting because this play happened in 2 languages. It was a bilingual play. It was English and Spanish. So there was some additional information in here. This is set up a little bit more traditionally. Cues again marked in pencil. I think you might be able to see that on camera. There was some additional information in back, which was like a Spanish commonly used words in the play. And then, of course, in the back is cue lists and other things. Now, the other thing I wanted you to note about this is this was transitioned into a very small binder. The likelihood of me remounting this play is fairly low. So everything is crammed into a very small binder. This is what I was talking about archive binders the other day in class. Let me pull out one more example. We'll pause here for a moment, and I'll be right back. The final prompt book I'm going to show you for right now is one from Ghost the Musical. This again was a fairly standardized project. We didn't use the little tabs that you were talking about before. There were quite a few more cues in here and more called spotlight cues. This was a special effects show. If you're not familiar with Ghost the Musical, the quick synopsis here is essentially there's a man that is killed in a gunfight, and he is a ghost because he's unable to move on to the ghostly world, or to heaven is basically what's alluded to in the play. And by play, in fact, this is a musical. But he's able to go through walls and through closed doors and things like that. So some scenes are spotlit in very specific ways so that we can provide an optical illusion that there's solid doors and solid walls and things. So many of those are listed as cues, and they're actually called. The only tabs here are actually act tabs and top of show tabs. One of the interesting things about this text is it's actually done in an older style, a typewritten format. Even though this play premiered not that long ago. This was from, let me say, this was from 2014. So not that long ago, but it is in the older style. And this continues throughout the script. We have cues and everything marked. And again, this was a working copy, so it's not quite as clean as other things. But again, if you need to quickly get to an act, you can do that. So those are just a few quick examples. We'll go through more of those throughout the semester. I just wanted to kind of give you a small taste. I hope this is in some way useful to you, and I hope this informs the entirety of this module for you. Again, if you have any questions, always feel free to ask them in class, the discussion board, in my office hours. And please remember that while posted office hours are preferential times, if you need so, I'm happy to schedule a meeting with you privately to talk about any of these issues or anything else relating to stage management or anything at all, quite frankly. I'm happy to talk to you about school issues or things outside of school. So, that's all for now. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope you had a great holiday.